Okay.
out of
పర్లేదు.
in a travel also, sitting in a bus.
ఓకే ఓకే.
Yeah, but I will try to keep listening to the things. Nanta, I hope.
సార్ లింబాద్రి గారు,
We'll start. Okay.
లింబాద్రి గారు,
సార్ స్టార్ట్ చెప్పండి. చేయండి సార్, మీరు స్టార్ట్ చేయండి.
వెల్కమ్ టు ఆల్. దిస్ ఇస్ ద లెక్చర్
Limbadri కూడా
సంవిధాన్
వచ్చినట్టున్నాడు.
సమాలోచన్ 46. We are organizing lectures from November 26th to 2024. From onwards, we are organizing a lectures on Constitution. Its name Samvidhan Samalochan. I think we are going to have a 75 lectures regarding 75 years of Indian Constitution. I think today is a very distinguished person and more democratic thinking and people friendly. Whatever we have in Telugu states, Professor V.S. Prasad was there. Still, he is working on people issues, and I think more details will tell Professor Limbadri garu. I welcome to Professor V.S. Prasad garu and Limbadri garu. Limbadri, already you know all, he gave a lecture on this issue on education, I think 2 months back. I very much happy today the agreeing to give a lecture. V.S. Prasad garu, it's a very happiest thing. I think this meeting will be continue up to 8:30. Sir, these organizations are from all over India, 7-8 organizations, basically Dalits and democratic organizations. It's continuous from November 26th without any break. I think we are going to reach 75 lectures without break. Like you, so many intellectuals, so many elders, so many respectable persons, they agreed to give lectures on Constitution. I think I welcome to all. Particularly, I welcome to Professor V.S. Prasad garu. I heard his lecture in my college days, junior college days in 78, 77. From onwards, I regularly am hearing him, and I'm following him, his writings and his thoughts also. I thank you very much, sir, the agreeing to our request to have a delivery lecture. I hand over to Professor Limbadri garu to moderate and give some brief introduction about our distinguished speaker. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Our beloved, respected Professor V.S. Prasad garu, dignitaries and host organizations, Sri Mallapalli Lakshmaya garu and Dr. Vinod Misra garu, Dr. Ramchandra Murthy garu, Professor Balramul garu, Professor Panjal Narsaya garu, and Raghavacharya garu, Sukhdev garu, and so many other dignitaries in this meeting. I feel it is a privilege and honor for me to introduce a committed teacher, Professor V.S. Prasad garu. For a brief bio of Professor V.S. Prasad garu, was born in 1943 is a former professor of public administration, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. And he held many institutional leadership positions in higher education in India, like Vice Chancellor acting, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Vice Chancellor, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, and Director, NAAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. His contribution to the higher education is very highly respected, particularly to open distance learning and quality assurance is concerned. He received Commonwealth of Learning Award of Fellow of Commonwealth of Learning in recognition of his contribution to ODL in 2004. I am happy to share that our Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University conferred honorary causa in recognizing of his achievements and exemplary services in the field of higher education in 2023. And basically an institutional builder, and he is committed for the purpose of the institutional goals. Wherever he is, he keeps the constitutional framework in mind and pursue the institutional activities, institutional goals to reach the empowerment of targeted group, particularly for the students are concerned. And he is having a great concern, particularly for the Dalits and marginal sections. Wherever he get the opportunity, he tried to encourage and provide a opportunity for these people who are coming from the rural and marginal sections are concerned. And another important thing I want to mention, when we have an occasion of introducing Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in School of Public Administration as a thinker, he has taken a lead and he only wrote a great lesson or a thinker aspect in the administrative thinker of public administration that has given a lot of insights to the students who can understand the Indian institutions functioning in the public administration domain is concerned. And he says, he wrote a small, this thing that is a just adequate person's life in ODL. He mentioned that we don't learn from experiences, we learn from reflecting on experiences, which John Dewey said. He is always looking into the Ambedkar and John Dewey with regard to the higher education is concerned, and so many educational philosophers and Indian Constitution to make the institutions more vibrant and student friendly and always thinking about the student empowerment is the main concern. And I treat him as a role model for the teachers, particularly for me, is the best role model in the field of public administration is concerned. With these few words, I welcome on behalf of these organizers to deliver the lecture today, which we have given a topic for the Indian constitutional vision of education, reflections on realities. Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And I request you to deliver the address on this occasion.
Thank you, Professor Limbadri, Sri Mallepalli Lakshmi Garu, Professor Limbadri, very distinguished online participants. I'm thankful to all of you for joining and thankful to Center for Dalit Studies, Sri Lakshmi Garu, for giving me this opportunity to participate in this program. Let me start with complimenting the Center for Dalit Studies for this great initiative. I consider it as a great initiative in a sense. It is an initiative to strengthen the democracy. As all of us know, J.S. Mill called democracy as a government by discussion. And Lakshmaya Garu, Dalit Studies Center, Dalit Development Center, and many other centers have joined in this activity of celebrating the Samvidhan Samalochan lecture series, 75 lecture series they are organizing. I consider that this is a great activity to democratize democracy. In a sense, it is a great public reasoning activity. Amartya Sen said, democracy is public reason. So let me compliment Dalit Studies Center, Lakshmaya Garu particularly, and all other colleagues who are associated with this activity for this good initiative. Also, thank them for giving me this opportunity. I have had the experience of working in the higher education system for more than 4 decades in different capacities. As a teacher in the university system and as an educational administrator and working in a private institution, government institution, and state university and national university. With this experience, when after my retirement, I am more engaged in observing the phenomena. See, in observing, when I am trying to observe the journey of higher education, sometimes I am excited about the developments in higher education. Sometimes I am very much disturbed about the developments in higher education. I thought that this is an opportunity for me to reflect on the evolving situation, keeping in view the Constitution as a frame. When I say I am excited, sometimes when I hear the use of technology in education and the access to education to more people, or the policymakers claiming that we want to become a Viswaguru, I feel excited. But at the same time, when I see the realities, I am sometimes wondering how we can become a Viswaguru without having gurus in universities. More than 40% of the positions are in vacant. So these contradictions in the situation and evolving situation gives me an opportunity to reflect on what is happening in the education. Lakshmaya Garu asked me to speak on this contest of celebrating the Constitution, 75 years of Constitution. I thought that let us look at the constitutional vision of education and try to understand how the realities are related to this constitutional vision. That's why the topic I have selected is Indian Constitutional Vision, Reflections on Realities. Even though I have agreed to speak, after some time I felt some inconvenience, in a sense, some difficulty of, even though as a student of administration, we studied the Constitution. As a practitioners of education, we have some experience of educational practices. But relating the Constitution and educational practices, relating these two things. One way of relating these two things is, one way of understanding the constitutional vision is, see what are the constitutional provisions, see what are the judgments of Supreme Court in interpreting the Constitution. Because as all of us know, Constitution is not only a legal document, it is also a great social vision. Honorable Chief Justice of India, B.R. Gawai, rightly said, Constitution is a social revolution. So how do we understand the Constitution? How do we understand the vision of Constitution and examine the current practices in education? This is the challenge. One traditional way is understanding some of the provisions of the Constitution related to education. Maybe Article 21, which talks about the education as a fundamental right, or Article 46, which talks about the social justice in education, or some of these articles is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking is, recently I was going through a book on Indian Constitution by you see, the very distinguished scholar on constitutional studies, Gautam Bhatia. And he developed, in that book, he developed a concept of what is called as a constitutional common sense. I felt that this constitutional common sense is a right approach to understand the constitutional vision of education. Instead of going through some of the judgments of Supreme Court and constitutional provisions, and the constitutional common sense generally is identified as the widely shared and internalized ideas, assumptions, and beliefs among judiciary, judges and lawyers, policymakers, politicians and administrators, educationists, and public institutions about the constitutional vision of education. This common sense approach, it appealed to me because, as you know, as a student of social sciences, Gunnar Myrdal rightly said social sciences is nothing but sophisticated common sense. If you see in the history, Thomas Paine in 1706 wrote a brief book on common sense, explaining the importance or the foundational purposes of American Revolution. So common sense approach appealed to me very much. Constitutional common sense approach. Maybe this common sense approach also we draw from the provisions of the Constitution. Suppose, for example, Article 21 talks about the right to education, or maybe Article 15 and 16 talks about equality of opportunities, and Article 29 and 30 talks about the rights of minorities. Article 45 talks about the directive principles of Constitution. Article 46 talks about the promotion of economic and social interests of SCs, STs, and other backward classes. So all these provisions, if you take from all these provisions of the Constitution, you can draw something like a constitutional common sense on education. I have identified 4 elements of this constitutional common sense, which may be useful for us to understand the Indian Constitution's vision and make it as a benchmark to assess the realities. Why we are looking at the Indian constitutional vision is when we are trying to understand the realities, very complex realities, very contradictory realities also. In this context, maybe constitutional vision will help us as a framework to assess the relevance of realities. That's why constitutional vision is very, very important. The 4 elements of constitutional vision I have identified for our understanding and for examining the realities. One is educational equal access and opportunities for education, or education as a fundamental right. If you see the development of education as a fundamental right, in 2002, by the amendment of the Constitution, 86th Amendment of the Constitution, education is made as a fundamental right, particularly to children of age group of 6 to 14 years. But in the constitutional provisions, the equal access to education and equal opportunities to education is emphasized in many places. And its culmination as a fundamental right is a very, very important development. That's why it is treated as a fundamental right as a part of Article 21, which talks about, Article 21 talks about protection of life and personal liberty. So education is treated as a fundamental right under protection of life. If you have a right to life means you also have a right to education. That is the interpretation of the Constitution by Supreme Court, and this is included in the amendment to the Constitution 21 and added as 21(4), and Act is made in 2009 for this constitutional right. This is one of the important elements of constitutional vision. The second important element to me is education. If you see the Supreme Court judgment and many provisions of the Constitution, education is treated as a public service and education is treated as a public good. This is very important. The Supreme Court, in one of his judgments, it clearly said, education is an occupation, not a business. And many provisions of the Constitution, suppose for example, if you see the fundamental duties of the citizens, you see the Article 51, the scientific temper and excellence in education. And other provisions also, if you see the Ambedkar's vision is incorporated here, education as a public good. The social transformative role of education is emphasized. In the many provisions of the Constitution, the social transformative role of education. The education as an important tool for social transformation. And education has a public purpose, as a public good. Some people call it as a semi-public good. It has a personal purpose, it has a social purpose, and it has a national purpose. Education for social transformation. So this is an important dimension of constitutional vision of education. The third important dimension of constitutional vision of education is education for social justice. There are many provisions in the education, in the Constitution, particularly it may be mentioned as even Article 15.4 and Article 16.4, they talk about special provisions for weaker sections, maybe SCs or STs or OBCs. Special provisions are to be made for education of these sections. Because of unequal opportunities in social life, these inequalities have to be reduced and special provisions can be made. This is also based on the principle of what we call as a social justice principle. The social justice principle, when we are talking about a Rawls, John Rawls principles of social justice, he considered justice as fairness. Fairness requires special treatment. And Rawls called it as a discrimination principle. He justified discrimination on the ground that it leads to more equality, it leads to more fairness, it leads to more justification, more justice. That's why the provisions made in the Article 46, this is the directive principles, clearly says that state shall promote socially and educationally backward classes, education of socially and educationally backward classes. If you see Article 29 and 30, it focuses on the educational rights of minorities. And so these provisions, we find that there is a education for social justice has an important place in the Constitution. So the special provisions for education of weaker sections is a very important dimension of or important vision of education. The another dimension, we are a federation. And education, if you see the educational vision of Constitution, it is the concurrent responsibility of the center and the states. Before 1976, education was in the state list. In the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution, education was brought to the concurrent list, and now it is the responsibility, concurrent responsibility of center and the states. So if you broadly see the constitutional vision of education, it is a vision of equality, it is a vision of social justice, it is a vision of protection of interests of weaker sections, it is a vision of transformative role of education, it is a vision of what we call as a secular and scientific education. So this is the vision of constitutional vision of education. Let me now turn to what are the realities. When I say realities, we are living in a multiple realities, contradictory realities. Let me also say that during the last 75 years, we have many achievements in the field of education. As a nation, we can certainly feel proud of our achievements in the education. The 4 or 5 achievements, briefly, if you have to look back, 4 or 5 achievements. One is even the development of legal framework itself is a significant achievement. When I say development of legal framework, in 2002, making it a right to education act, a right to education as a fundamental right, and the Education Act in 2009, Right to Education Act in 2009, and this legal development, this legal provision. Earlier, we used to discuss only about the Directive Principles and Article 45 of the Directive Principles. where within 10 years, education must be provided, educational opportunities, universal primary education. That was the article which we used to emphasize. But now the legal framework has taken very advanced stage of right to education. And education is considered as a necessary requirement of life. If you have a life, you must have education. That is the legal framework itself is an important development. The second is there is a access to education. There is a considerable achievement in the access to education. If you see that literacy at the time of independence in 1950, it is only 18%. Now it is 80%. And access to primary education, almost it is a universal access to primary education. Even in the school education, access of more than 80% school education. If you see higher education also, there is an impressive expansion. In 1950, the GER, gross enrollment ratio, that means those who are in higher education in the age group of 18 to 23, people in the age group of 18 to 23 who are in the higher education, this is called as a gross enrollment ratio. In 1950, it is only 0.4%. In 2025, it is 28 or 29%. In 1950, only maybe 20 universities were there. Now we have 1,200 universities or university level institutions. In 1950, maybe 500 colleges. Now we have more than 40,000 colleges and 10,000 standalone institutions. So now we have more than 50,000 institutions, one of the largest education system in the world, next to China, if you see in terms of the access. So we must also be happy that there is a lot of access in education. We must also be happy that there is many social justice initiatives also. Education of SCs, education of tribals, education of backward classes. In all these areas also, a lot of opportunities were provided. There is certainly some improvement in the educational opportunities of these sections also. So social justice initiatives also, we must appreciate the social justice initiatives also. Then the fourth one is, we must also appreciate what is called as a human resource development. And we have many good institutions which are internationally recognized, maybe in the form of Indian Institutes of Technology or Indian Institutes of Science or Indian Institutes of Management, and many colleges also. And human resources development also required for our industry, required for our development. Certainly we made some achievements in the development of human resources also. So the point I am trying to emphasize is, if you see the last 75 years of independence, after the constitution came into operation, we have made many achievements in the field of education. So we must be aware of these achievements. We must also feel proud of some of these achievements. But if you move to next, as I said earlier also, I am also, when I am observing education field or the evolving education sector, I am also disturbed about many gaps in the education sector, many limitations in the education sector, and many problems in the education sector. These problems and these gaps, if you see, to me, let me group them under two heads. One is what I feel there is a wide gap between our dharma and our karma. When I am saying there is a wide gap in education between our dharma, what I am talking about education, about our dharma, what are our goals of education, what are our values of education, or what is our constitutional vision of our education. When I am talking about our dharma, the constitutional vision of education I am talking. What is our dharma? And when I am talking about karma, I am not talking about karma as a destiny. I am talking about karma, our actions, our operations, our operating systems, our practices. The point I am trying to make is there is a wide gap between our dharma and our karma. Let us see that 4 or 5 our dharmas and gaps in our dharmas. Suppose, for example, we are discussing about education as a fundamental right. Okay, this is our dharma. But what is our achievement in realizing education as a fundamental right. Firstly, the education as a fundamental right, the right itself is a limited right. When I say it is a limited right, it is a right to education of children of age group of 6 to 14 only. Many experts in the field of education and many activists and many people who are concerned about education, when we say education is a very transformative, has a very transformative role, this fundamental right has to be extended, or the scope of the fundamental right has to be extended. It should include from pre-primary education to school education. That means it should not be between 6 and 14, it should be between 3 and 18. Then only this fundamental right has some meaning. When we say primary education, not only primary education, school education must be a universal provision. And the state must take the responsibility of providing school education from a pre-primary to that of high school. So that means the fundamental right, our karma should be, if at all we want to achieve our dharma of education as a fundamental right, the scope must be extended. Not only scope, the implementation must be made more effective. Supposing the implementation in the Act 2009, it talks about 25% of seats in the private education sector also must be provided to the weaker sections. In most of the cases, this 25% is not fulfilled. The condition is not fulfilled. So the point I am trying to make is there is a gap between our dharma and karma if you see this as a fundamental right. Suppose if you take another fundamental dharma, the education is considered as a public good and as a public service activity. But if you see in the last 20-25 years, particularly after 1991, the enormous growth of private sector in education. Now today, there are more than 400 private universities and public universities are only 395. State public universities are only 395. Of the 1200 universities, more than 400 are private universities. Nearly 95 to 98% of students in professional education are in private sector. Large number of students in the school education also in the private sector, higher education in the private sector. So it's a public good role. The challenge is here. I'm not saying that public sector, private sector as a sector or per se is against the constitution. Constitution provides permits for it. But the public sector and private sector, if you are looking at the public sector role and private sector role, the challenge is the private sector. Private sector, sometimes if the private sector is based on the philanthropy orientation, there's nothing wrong in that. I worked in a private sector, in a private college for more than 10 years as a lecturer in Warangal, Chandakantaya Memorial College. That college was established with a donation from a businessman for promotion of education. There's no profit making intention. So private sector, I'm not saying all the private sector is wrong. Private sector has an important role. Private sector as a public service activity has an important role. The challenge is how do you make the private sector as a public service activity? Yes, private sector has played an important role in providing educational opportunities to middle class and upper middle classes. But the opportunities are limited to the weaker sections. Their enrollment of weaker sections in these institutions is very marginal. They can't afford. Affordability question is there. So public sector and private sector and the dharma of public good of education or public service of education is compromised in the process of development of this private sector for profit, not private sector for service, private sector for profit. I am associated in a different way as a quality assurance professional in some private sector. I know that some private sector institutions are playing a very important role, very significant role in providing quality education. But there are a large number who are interested only in making profits. If you apply the Pareto's principle of 80%, 20%, maybe 80% of private sector is for profit and maybe 20% for philanthropy. Maybe see if that is there. But here, our dharma is make education as a public service activity, as a public good. But our karma moves us in a different direction. It is moving us in a market orientation. It is moving us in a private orientation or profit orientation. So our challenge is, how do you make private sector as a public service activity? This is another challenge. The third one, if you look at the education for social justice, our dharma is education for social justice. Provide opportunities for SCs, STs, OBCs, and these weaker sections. Yes, some provision is made. But if you see still today, if you see their GR is less than the GR of open category, gross enrollment ratio of SC, ST is less than the gross enrollment ratio of open category. And even the gross enrollment ratio of minorities is less than the gross enrollment ratio of open category. In OBCs, I find that it is more or less the similar. But in these cases also, a lot of things are to be done. There are many things to do, whether it is in form of scholarships or whether it is in form of encouraging them, or whether it is in the form of providing a proper ecosystem in the education institutions for their education. When social justice, not merely providing opportunity is one dimension, but how the opportunity is practiced, is realized, how the system is being operated. So social justice also requires more attention and more effort to see that the people from weaker sections, people from marginalized sections are not only provided opportunity, but they will have a fair chance of success also. That is also very, very important. That's why here comes, you are talking about the access. Okay, access wise, as I said, very commendable achievements in access wise. But if you see success wise, the success wise, that is not that commendable. Why I'm saying the success wise is not commendable? Suppose, for example, the success of learners. Many studies were made about the ASER has conducted many studies about the achievements of the school education or school children achievements. They found that the access to school and learning, these two things are not one and the same. Yes, access to school is provided, but is it resulting in learning? Many studies say that the quality of education is very poor, and the standards of education, the standards of the students of fourth class or fifth class is not even that of a second class students, or even eighth class or ninth class students also are not able to go beyond the fourth class or fifth class. Even the standards of higher education also, quality is a major concern and success is a major concern. Success in terms of, when we are talking about a success in education, students who join education institutions must be able to come out successfully with required knowledge, skills, and aptitudes required for professional development, for individual development, for social development, and for national development. They must be able to contribute for social development, for national development, and for professional development. They must be, in a sense, to talk it in a very general terms, employable. Students are acquiring certificates, but not the knowledge or skills required. Employability is a big problem. The quality is a big problem. So these are some of the concerns, and it is also resulting in, if you see that the dharma and karma gap is also, you find in the policies also. If you see the public policies in education, the second dimension which I want to discuss is the policies, public policies. In these public policies also, I find there is a disconnect between public policy and their implementation and its implementation. The disconnect between the stated policy and implementation. This is another challenge. Take the example of National Education Policy 2020. This is the latest policy, the third education policy after independence. First education policy in 1968, and the second education policy in 1986 by 92, and third one is in 2020, National Education Policy. The National Education Policy, what I am saying is, my main concern is, as a policy, if you see that, it is an expression of many good intentions. Particularly when I read the introduction chapter, I am very excited. It has given the broad vision of education, and you see many good things are mentioned. But my concern is the policy implementation. It has mentioned many good recommendations, but the policy implementation. Suppose, for example, the policy document talks about there should not be a commercialization. But what is the roadmap they have suggested for not having commercialization? 2020, the policy came into operation. July 29, the policy came into operation in 2020. Last 5 years, there is an increasing private sector role, increasing commercialization, increasing profit making, increasing marketization. You are talking about only courses for market. So what is the roadmap for not having commercialization of education? If you read the policy statement, you don't find any roadmap. The policy only says that regulatory agencies must control. But as you know, regulatory agencies, the problem of integrity of regulatory agencies, the problem of management of regulatory agencies by this private sector, the problem of the actual operation of the regulatory agencies also is a very important problem. So they are talking about a non-commercialization and only philanthropy, but in practice, we don't find any way of how you want to achieve. And the education policy also talks about more financial resources for education purposes. Okay, they talk about since 50, 60 years, we are talking about 6% GDP for education. And this particular policy, NEP 2020 specifically says that every year, education budget must be reduced by 1% and make it in the coming 20 years, 20% of general budget. But if you see last 5 years, budget at the national level and budget at the state level for education is reduced, not increased. So that is what I am saying. Policy statements are different and practices are different. Implementation is different. That's why there is a disconnect between these two things. More funding. And they also talk about more effective regulatory system. They talk about light but tight regulatory system. But effective regulatory systems, many experts in the education, they feel that our education system in India is over-regulated and ineffectively regulated. The problem is over-regulation and ineffectively regulated. But how do we ensure a proper regulatory system? This is another challenge. The another challenge is about the policy. They are talking about increasing GER to 50% in the coming 15 years. By 2035, they want to increase GER by 50%. Okay, you see, it's a good ideal. Ideal is good. But you see, today we find the quality of education is a big problem. I'll come to that a little bit later about the GER also. If you want to increase the GER, okay. Today, our problem is unfulfilled demand for education. We are living in a demand-driven system of education. From a supply-driven system, we have moved to the demand-driven system. Educational opportunities are available now, but there are no takers. In the state level or at the national level, 4,000 engineering colleges, there are no takers in many engineering colleges. They are looking for a quality engineering colleges only there the seats are filled. And the same is the case with general education also. In our Telangana state also, when 4 lakh seats are available in the general education sector, only 2 lakhs are filled. So the problem is, if you are increasing the GER also, you must also able to examine what is the economic system, or what is the labor market system you are visualizing, what is the development strategy you are visualizing, how you are going to absorb in the development sector, how you are going to provide employment to these people. Without examining those things, merely increase it itself is not a solution. Another thing is about the quality also. If you are looking at the quality, I had some experience of working in a quality assurance agency. The problem in Indian quality system is inequalities in quality. This is a big problem. Inequalities in all sectors, inequalities in access, inequalities in quality also. Particularly if you see that inequalities in quality, there are some good educational institutions in the public sector and both in the private sector. Good quality educational institutions. Large number of average and below average institutions. So the problem, sometimes the people say that no, we don't have the quality institutions in the what you call as in the first 200 institutions or first 100 institutions or first 10 high-ranking institutions. We are talking about the our place in the ranking system. But to me, more important problem in the quality is we may try for higher grades and higher ranking system and good ranking in the international ranking system. But more important to me is the quality of average institutions. Quality of the colleges. 80% students are in the colleges. Quality of colleges. In the universities also, state universities quality. Not merely a few central universities or few institutions national importance. The quality of these institutions is very, very important. Where large number of students from SC, ST, OBC or weaker sections are studying, their quality is very important concern. So that is important concern. That's why when I say the success is also very important, there the success also is very, very important. Then another dimension is in the whole education sector. If you are looking at the purpose of education, our policy talks about, if you see the even NEP 2020, policy talks about a very larger goals of education. They talks about a social transformation role of education. It talks about the social justice, creating a just society. Education for creating a just society. Education for developing a critical thinking. Education for developing an intellectual abilities to look at the things critically. But unfortunately, our system is such that our education system, increasingly we find in the increasing education system, increasing authoritarian tendencies and institutions losing their autonomy. You find very interesting examples, very interesting cases of where dissent is treated as an anti-national activity. If you are critical of the government, they are not able to make a distinction between the government and the nation, government and the state. If you are critical of a government, you say that no, you are against the nation. And in the universities also, that freedom, that universities as the place for new ideas, universities as a place for pluralistic approach to society, understanding society, pluralistic approach to development of society, or multiple ways of looking at the problems. These things are not either encouraged or appreciated or allowed in the university system. As a result, the whole education process is converted to as a skill development activity. Not able to make a distinction between a training institution and an education institution. Yes, skill development is necessary and employability is necessary, is very important. As all of us know that education has the twin goals of education for making a living is very, very important, and education for living, education for citizenship. If you see the vision of education, Ambedkar's views on education, education is an empowerment activity, education is a transformational activity, education is an activity to have a dignity, education is an activity to express yourself. These type of things are missing in the actual operations. So this is a very serious concern. And there is also serious concern about what we call as the effective governance systems also. Very ineffectively governed educational institutions is a common feature. Not able to achieve their goals. Crisis in leadership. Sometimes, you see, when I say that the public policy and its implementation, the public policy talks about every institution or all the institutions required very qualified, competent, and very empowered faculty. But if you see in practices how the faculty is recruited, what are the practices of recruitment of faculty? Are you able to recruit quality faculty? Or in the recruitment of faculty, you are more concerned about recruiting people on political ideology considerations or political attitudes or political inclinations? You are talking about providing a good leadership by the education institutions. The NEP talks about leadership, good leadership, fair leadership, leadership with integrity, leadership with competence. But if you see in operation, the leadership, how the leadership is selected, how the vice chancellors are selected. Sometimes, you see, I had the opportunity of associating with the selection of vice chancellors of some private universities and also some public universities. Very interestingly, we have many reservations about private universities, But some private universities, at least, I am not saying all, some private universities are looking for very competent or very well-reputed academics as vice chancellors, because they want the image of that academician, that image and that leadership to deliver goods, to provide good education. Thereby, they can make good money. But in public universities, sometimes, I'm not saying that all cases, public universities, you are looking for our own persons. Our own persons may be our own community, our own friends, our own political affiliation, our own persons. So the vice chancellor's position, leadership positions became a more political positions. In this context, how you can achieve the dharma of education, how you can achieve education role as a transformative role, how you can achieve education role as a realization of human potential, development of competencies among the students. If you have this type of leadership, I'm not saying that all the leaders, all the vice chancellors are of that type, all the leaders are of that type, all institutions are doing. It is a mixed reality. But at the same time, we must be conscious of these things, and we must be always continuously debate about these things. Let me very briefly, 2-3 minutes I will take, 3-4 minutes maximum I will take. What is the way forward? We have discussed about the constitutional vision, and in the realities also we have discussed about some of our achievements. We have also discussed about some of the limitations, some of the problems, some of the gaps, particularly in the implementation part of it. As far as the statements are concerned, if you only go by statements, in rhetoric, we are all great rhetoric experts. But in practice, this is the big problem. That's why, if you are looking at way forward, yes, many suggestions were made, many people are making many suggestions. But in this context of discussion, because the Dalit Studies Center for Dalit Studies is organizing these lectures, in this, I find that we have to continuously debate on, you see, what we have to do is, we have to align, we have to integrate, or we have to align our dharma and our karma. When I say we have to align our dharma and karma, what we want to achieve, if we are clear, and we also must be aware of what are the steps required to achieve this goal. Suppose we want to achieve the goal of education as a social justice. We must be aware of what are the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7 or 8, 9, 10 to be taken. These two things must be aligned. We are talking about the quality. Yes, dharma, about dharma, everybody now talks about quality important, quality is important, quality education is required. There's no problem. But are we aligning our actions with that dharma of quality? Aligning our actions? When you don't recruit people properly, when you don't appoint the people properly, when you don't provide funds properly, that dharma cannot be achieved. So my first suggestion is we have to align dharma and karma. Second requirement is, you see, in the education, we are also caught up with the very polarized situation in the field of education. Interestingly, when 2020 policy, NEP, was formulated, Prime Minister said that it should be a national policy, like a defense policy or foreign affairs policy, which is a common interest of the nation, is more important, not the political party's policy, not the partisan policy. But unfortunately now, it is so much polarized. If you see that broad national consensus, you are not able to build on the national education policy. We are not able to build that broad consensus. Broad consensus you can build only if you balance national interest and regional interest. If you want to centralize everything, and if you are looking only from your political interest point of view, and not only political interest in general, if you are looking at it from a partisan point of view, you will not be able to build a national interest. If you see that center and state both are expected to play a concurrent role. But if center gives directions only, center doesn't bother about what is the role of states, how the roles are feeling, states are feeling. Suppose in the national policy, 3 or 4 states are clearly passed resolutions in the legislature that we are not going to accept this national policy. We have to debate on that. Interestingly, this national policy is so far not debated in Parliament, not debated in the CABE, not debated. And we have to build a national consensus on policy. Any policy, If you ask me, as a student of public policy, what is a good policy? A good policy is a policy where there is a political consensus. A good policy is a policy where it is implementable. A good policy is a policy is a good policy where proper financial funding is provided. A good policy is one where governance system is very effective. These are all some of the characteristics. That's why my concern is we must be able to continuously debate. That's why the Center for Dalit Studies has taken a good step of debate it, discuss it, create an awareness among the people. Ultimately, it is the people's consciousness, it is the people's awareness, it is the people's pressure which makes a change in the educational policy. The constitutional vision of education can be realized only by people's awareness. More and more discussion, more and more debate, more and more dissent, more and more questioning. That is what is required. And here also, the focus is on what you have to allocate. You have to also agree that you have to allocate more resources and you have to strengthen the public education system and also evolve a proper system to regulate private education. You can't remove private education from the field now. It has taken deep roots and it has traveled in a long distance. Now, what we can do or what we have to do is how do you regulate it effectively? How do you ensure that private education system also becomes an important player in making education as a public good and public provision? That is very, very important here. Then you see what is required in the institutional operation, institutional efficiency levels, governance systems also, because focus, if when you are say that, is an inclusive quality education to all. When you are, I'm repeating it, successful outcome, you have to focus not merely on arrangement approach, but you have to focus on realization approach. In the institutions, in educational institutions, our focus now is presently more on arrangement approach and less on realization approach. Let me stop here and let me conclude by saying that the constitutional vision is influenced by Dr. Ambedkar's vision of education. And now when we are looking at realization of constitutional vision, we must be conscious of the practical difficulties and conscious of the ground realities and how the ground realities have to be have to be changed. And that's why it is a process of change of a society to change an education system. We must be engaged in constantly in debating and discussing the ways and means of reaching the constitutional vision. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Professor Limbadri. Probably you may.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your great, enlightened, and thought-provoking lecture, making the Constitution as a central focus area and identifying the key elements of this your topic, the constitutional vision of education, reflections on realities. The four elements that may be educational opportunities or access, education, a public service, a public good, education for social justice, and the concurrent responsibility, because it is not in a central list or state list. You have mentioned, and you have clearly mentioned about the achievements that may be the developmenting of the legal framework and access, social justice, and development of human resources, building institutions, and identifying a gap. You are unique. That is the karma and dharma. So the whole the theme should move around this, the gaps, the karma and dharma is concerned, and finally you have given a way forward which can be insightful for the organizations to take further initiatives on aligning the karma dharma and creating the steps required to provide the quality education, development of all institutional, not a institutional arrangements. It should be a reality things that can be possible, implementable things. Really, it is very, very useful for the all the institutions, not only the education sector. Wherever the public policy is there, the policy should be a implementable. That should be a funding. That should be a governance. That all things you have included in your presentation. Really, on behalf of the organizers and my own behalf, I thank you very much for your time and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you, sir. And thank you all the senior people and participants sparing their valuable time in this. Now is the time for the interactions with the V.S. Prasad Garu. Please share your thoughts and interact with them.
సార్
రాఘవచారి గారు చెప్పండి ప్లీజ్.
సార్ లెక్చర్ చాలా బాగా వచ్చింది సార్.
ఓకే ఓకే.
అది చాలా విషయాల్ని లోతుగా అడ్రస్ చేసింది. ఇది ఒకటి. రెండోది ఏంటంటే ఇప్పుడు విద్యారంగంలో జరుగుతున్నదంతా కూడా అంటే పాఠశాల స్థాయిలో నేను 76 నుంచి ప్రైవేట్ గా 82 నుంచి గవర్నమెంట్ లో
రాఘవచారి గారు, ఇఫ్ పాసిబుల్ ప్లీజ్ స్పీక్ ఇన్ ఇంగ్లీష్ ఆర్ హిందీ.
నాకు కష్టం సార్.
ఓకే ఓకే
ఓకే ఓకే రాఘవచారి గారు మీరు చెప్పండి, మేమైనా
అయితే ఇప్పుడు పరిస్థితి ఏమైతుందంటే స్కూల్ లెవెల్లో అంటే ఉన్నత పాఠశాల స్థాయిలో విద్య అంతా కూడా టీచర్ల భుజాల మీద పెట్టి ఉపాధ్యాయులు సరిగా పనిచేయక ప్రైవేట్ పాఠశాలలు ఏర్పడ్డాయి. అందువల్లనే ప్రైవేట్ పాఠశాలలు నడుస్తున్నాయని మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. మొత్తం గవర్నమెంటే అట్లా ప్రచారం చేస్తున్నది. కాలేజెస్ లో కూడా జూనియర్ కాలేజెస్ లెవెల్లో కూడా అట్లే ఉంది. యూనివర్సిటీస్ దాకా వచ్చేటప్పటికి అది మాట్లాడడం లేదు. కానీ యూనివర్సిటీలలో స్టాఫే లేరు, టీచింగ్ ఫ్యాకల్టీస్ లేకుండా యూనివర్సిటీస్ ఉన్నాయి అక్కడ చేరుతున్న పిల్లలకు. ఇక ప్రొఫెషనల్ కాలేజెస్ అయితే మీరు అన్నట్టు 95% అవన్నీ ప్రైవేట్ గానే ఉన్నాయి. ఇప్పుడు ఒక విధానంగానే ప్రైవేట్ వచ్చినప్పుడు ఆ డిపార్ట్మెంట్స్ లో ఆ శాఖలలో పనిచేసే వాళ్ళ ఫెయిల్యూర్ గా విద్యారంగం ప్రైవేట్ అవుతున్నదనే ఒక వాదన బలంగా ప్రభుత్వం తీసుకురావడం, ఇవాళ వాళ్ళకి నాయకత్వం ఇచ్చి పనిచేసే ఆర్గనైజేషన్స్ కూడా మనం బాగా పనిచేస్తే ఇవి బతుకుతాయి లేకపోతే పోతాయని మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. అంటే గవర్నమెంట్ ను అడిగే పరిస్థితి లేకుండా పోయింది. ఇది ఎందుకు జరిగింది అనేది ఒకటి ప్రశ్న. రెండోది ఏంటంటే ఇవాళ వైద్య రంగం ఉంది, డాక్టర్లు గవర్నమెంట్ హాస్పిటల్స్ లో సరిగా పనిచేయక వైద్య రంగం ప్రైవేట్ అయిందని అనటం లేదు. ట్రాన్స్పోర్ట్ రంగం ఉంది, ఆర్టీసీలో ఉండే డ్రైవర్లు కండక్టర్లు పనిచేయక ఆర్టీసీ ప్రైవేటైజ్ అయిందని అనలేదు. ఒక విద్యారంగాన్ని మాత్రమే ఇట్లా టార్గెట్ చేసిన పరిస్థితి ఉన్నది. దీని ముందర మీరు అన్నట్టు రాజ్యాంగంలోని సకారాత్మక అంటే పాజిటివ్ ఆర్టికల్స్ కానివ్వండి, రాజ్యాంగం ఇచ్చినటువంటి ఆదేశాలు కానివ్వండి, అవేవి ఉద్దేశపూర్వకంగానే అమలుకు రాకుండా ఉన్నటువంటి పరిస్థితి ఉన్నది. కనుక ఈ మాట్లాడే వాళ్ళ ప్రాధాన్యతను కూడా ఎందుకు వీళ్ళు అడుగుతున్నారని ఆలోచించే వాళ్ళు కూడా లేరు. అంటే ప్రభుత్వమే ఒక దోషిగా ఉండి మొత్తం విద్యారంగాన్ని, పబ్లిక్ సెక్టార్ విద్యారంగాన్ని ధ్వంసం చేసి మా చేతులు ఏమీ లేదు అయిపోయింది అనే పరిస్థితి వచ్చింది సార్. దీన్ని మనం ఎట్లా ఆపగలుగుతాము? ఇవాళ రియల్ గా సఫర్ అవుతున్నటువంటి ప్రజలకు నాణ్యమైన విద్యను ఎట్లా ఇవ్వగలుగుతాం? దళిత్ కావచ్చు, ఆదివాసీ కావచ్చు, వాళ్ళు మొదటిసారి ఆలకు వస్తున్న తరంలో అక్కడ విద్య కొలాప్స్ అవుతున్నది. ఇంకొక వేలో మనుధర్మాన్ని చాలా సిస్టమేటిక్ అమలు చేసేటటువంటి పరిస్థితి, ఇదంతా కూడా అదే అన్నమాట. ఇక
that is true. Okay, we'll move forward. Okay. Okay, thank you Limbadri garu. If you can ask others also to join, what we will do is we will listen to other observations also, then I may respond at the end. Is it okay, Professor Limbadri? Okay, you can listen to other experts also.
Yes sir, yes sir.
Other observations also.
Ramchandramurthy sir.
Sir, please.
Ramchandramurthy. ఇప్పుడు నేషనల్ లెవెల్లో 3 ఎడ్యుకేషన్ పాలసీ వచ్చినంత వరకు స్వాతంత్రం వచ్చిన తర్వాత అది బాగానే ఉంది. కానీ స్టేట్ లెవెల్లో మాత్రం గవర్నమెంట్ మారిన ప్రతిసారి ఎడ్యుకేషన్ సిస్టమ్ మారుతుంది. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఆంధ్రాలో జగన్మోహన్ రెడ్డి ఇంగ్లీష్ పెట్టాడు.
సార్ మీరు కూడా ఇంగ్లీష్ లో మాట్లాడండి. అదర్ పీపుల్ ఉన్నారు కదా.
సారీ,
హలో.
there are 3 national policies in the national level. But in states, the government changes and the policy changes. For example, in Andhra Pradesh, Jagannath Reddy has introduced English medium in all schools.
Yes.
Now, this government has come headed with Chandrababu Naidu. He is having different ideas. Every 5 years it changes. Is there any way to stop this? To have a national policy?
Okay.
Sir, I'm Srinivas Vajapayajula and I work for Bank of America as Associate Vice President in Cyber Security.
Okay.
And first of all, thank you very much for delivering an insightful and enlightening lecture. In fact, it was not known to me that right to education flows from right to life. Although I'm a man of law, but then this particular aspect was not very much known to me.
Yes,
Thanks for sharing that. And also, I have just one submission for your consideration, sir, and that is, on behalf of our organization, we normally visit various engineering colleges for recruiting people. So what is noticed is that there is no industry institution interaction happening. So I don't know if our national education policy envisages such a scheme of things, wherein and whereby every institution is supposed to interact with industry. For example, because I'm into cyber security,
Yes.
I want to speak on behalf of this field, cyber security. So in some of the colleges, there is not enough exposure to the students about the current trends in cyber security. Okay, and therefore those students are not equipped, even like you very well mentioned, that they are only achieving graduation but not the required skill set. Unfortunately, that is the sorry state of affairs. So I would assume that such a there should be a provision in our national education policy to make this interaction a mandatory thing. Okay, and on that note, I would like to say thank you.
Okay.
To yourself and to everybody whoever organized this wonderful session. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Sir, anybody is there to ask questions? Then otherwise, Professor Garu will answer these whatever questions came till now. Sir, please answer it, sir. Otherwise, we can.
Okay. Friends, thanks for your participation. I'm very happy that some friends responded. Mr. Raghavachari, he is a activist in the social life. He has a good knowledge and also a good experience in the ground, field experience, and a good teacher with a good reputation as a good teacher. He raised an important question. Generally, we are facing this problem, the problem of the government schools, particularly government schools. Now they are facing a problem of large number of students are not joining the government schools and they are preferring private schools. This is the reality. Suppose if you see that in Telangana also, the more than 50% of students, I think maybe 60% of students are in the private school sector, and government schools, many schools, sometimes they face the problem of lack of even 3 or 4 students also, even though schools are there, students are not there. And generally for this problem, Raghavachari's concern is, instead of understanding the complexity of the problem, there is a blame on the teachers because the teachers are not doing their job properly. That's why students are not joining the government schools. So this blame on the teachers, is it proper to blame the teachers? Is the question he has raised. You see, one thing is, as all of us know, that all social problems are multi-causal. It is not a result of any one cause. There will be multiple causes for any social phenomena. If you look at the government education, the education in government sector, and people not preferring, parents not preferring their children to join the government schools is also a phenomena which we observe. So what are the reasons for that? Generally, in Telangana also, the Chief Minister also raised the question. Almost we are spending 1 lakh rupees for a school child. We are spending that much of money, but in spite of that, government schools' performance is very poor, or people are not preferring government schools. This is a serious problem. To me, one thing is, you see, we as teachers also must also understand and appreciate what role we have. I am not of the opinion that it is only teachers who are responsible for this phenomenon. It is a social phenomena. It is a result of a multiple causation. Multiple causation which includes the competencies of the teachers and their work culture is one dimension. So you have to improve the competencies of the teachers. How do we improve the competencies of the teacher? Providing them proper training mechanism, and also making them concentrate on the school duties. If you see that in the public schools, in the school teachers are interested with many other responsibilities also. They may be socially useful, socially necessary, maybe in the census figures, election time, census time, many other activities also they are interested. So they are not able to concentrate their attention fully on the school one. And they are not finding enough opportunities for improve their competencies, another dimension also. Then the parents, then the infrastructure facilities at the school level, resources at the school level, type of infrastructure facilities and resources at the school level, and the public involvement in the development and in the maintenance of that schools, and proper monitoring mechanisms in these things. So all these factors are responsible, but to some extent, competencies and work culture of teachers also is responsible. That is my own feeling. But I agree with Mr. Raghavachari to blame the teachers and escape the responsibility. The blame game. The blame game is not a proper way of resolving a problem. We say that who is responsible. We also find in the colleges also sometimes. We find, I have some knowledge about colleges. Sometimes teachers blame the students blame the teachers. And teachers and students blame the management, and management blame the students. Suppose low levels of motivation of the students also is one of the problems. Why that low level of motivation of the students? Maybe their background also, their home atmosphere also may not be that conducive to motivate them also. That also is one problem at the school level, low motivation level, low achievement levels also. First generation of learners also. Maybe a cause. At the college or university level also, now we find that teachers feel that students are not interested in attending classes. Students feel that teachers are not properly managing the classes or properly delivering it. We are responsible. So my point is I am making is there is a problem, and the blame game is not an answer to the problem. Answer to the problem is multiple causes, identify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 causes, and address all these causes simultaneously. Then in the earlier sectors, so many other problems also are there. That is one response. The second response is about the state level and national level educational policies. And with the change of the state level governments from one government to another government, or a government from one political party to another party, and the state level policies are also being changed, and national policy, what is the relationship between the state level and national level? That's why here it is interesting. You find that 2020 education policy, 3 or 4 states, they say that we are developing our own state policy. Suppose Karnataka has also established a state level policy making body with Professor Sukhdev Thorat as the chairman, very distinguished academician and educationist former chairman of the UGC, with he as a chairman, Karnataka government has established a policy making committee and they are developing the policy. Like that, Kerala also has developed its own framework. Like that, Telangana also is thinking of developing its own framework. It has only its own education commission. So the problem is here like this. Earlier or now, national policy and state policy, they should be complementary to each other. That's how we are looking at the policies. Yes, state level policy also is very, very important. National level policy also is very, very important. National level policy, broad national framework, it must provide. It must also give opportunity for the state to experiment with their own systems, with their own understanding, their own priorities, their own policies. Suppose Tamil Nadu government is opposed to the 3-language formula. They are saying that 2-language formula. Some other states also are thinking of it. So how you can combine these two things? That is what is required. Instead of saying that if you don't follow the national policy, we don't give funds, we don't give resources. That is not the correct approach. The correct approach will be, what is the importance of this national policy? If you are able to convince all of them, if you are not able to convince, you have to wait for some more time. Suppose 3-language formula, it is there since 64, since Kothari Commission, it is there. But now the government of Tamil Nadu thinks that, or some other government thinks that 2-language formula is more preferable to us than the 3-language formula. I am not taking any stand on that language formula. What my stand is, you have to wait for convincing them. If not, okay, let them experiment it with some time. If they realize the disadvantages, they should come into the national stream. So national policies and state policies must be concurrently developed, and every state can develop its own policy. And with the change of government, if it wants to change its policies also, as it is, there is nothing wrong. But frequent change of policies, merely because the government is changed, earlier government followed some policy, we want to follow the different policy, that is not correct approach. That is not a correct approach, because the policy is a continuum, is a continuation. If you think that the contest requires a different approach, then you can convince the people and have a different approach. So that is what is required, is a more national consensus. Consensus between the states and nation is very, very important to develop appropriate policies at a national level and give some flexibility to the states also to operate in this broad framework. That is what is required, some flexibility to some extent. Don't say that, not beyond that. If it is beyond that, it affects the national problem, that is okay. That is what is required. Then another observation, interesting, it is also industry and education interaction and internship. Now today, as you know, it is a very important dimension. It is important, it is necessary not only industry and education institutions and the service sector and education institutions and the technology sector and education institutions, all these sectors must interact. And that is what is called as now the networking is very, very important. Networking is very, very important. Collaboration is very, very important. And working together is very, very important. And the what we call as the internship arrangements. And these are some of these things. Only thing is, what is happening is, as you know, this industry interaction and industry educational collaboration, we are talking since first policy. Also, there is a reference, second policy also there is a reference, third policy, emphasized, re-emphasized it. Today, we are also emphasizing on the technology applications also. It is good. But my own concern, as again I am repeating it, my own concern is all these steps must be integrated. The process of integration is somewhere the link is missing. The link from our desire and action, and that link we are not able to provide. If you don't provide that link, suppose today the curriculum, new curriculum, all agencies are talking about a new curriculum, different curriculum, and all agencies are talking about making the curriculum more resulting in more employable skills. That is absolutely a good welcome development. But the only problem I am looking is the institutions and realization process of institutional activities. There comes, as Amartya Sen in a different context, he observed that we are talking today from inputs to process to outcome based. Amartya Sen in a different context observed that what is required is the outcomes which are what is called as a composite outcomes. Outcomes which take into account the nature of inputs, outcomes which take into account the processes, outcomes which take into account the agency role of the faculty, the agency role of the institutions, and outcomes which are useful to the individual, society, and to the nation. So he is talking about a composite outcomes or cumulative outcomes. Amartya Sen is talking about a general social development. So what is required is a more detailed planning and execution. That is what is required. We are at the stage of only talking of ideas. But you see, as all of us know, quality cannot be ensured by orders. By orders. Quality is a result of an intelligent action. Education is a result of an intelligent action. So, education, as Jan Dewey said, we must continuously learn from our experiences. Education is nothing but reimagination of our experiences. What are our experiences? How do you reimagine these experiences? That's why he said education is life. When we say education is life, learning from experiences, learning from industry and university interactions. Last 20 years, what are the lessons you learn from university and industry interaction? Then today, if you design a system, must be based on the 20 years lessons of university and industry interaction. Not that some leader will come and say that, oh, I'm saying all these things new things. Everybody is talking about these things. Since 20 years, industry, university interaction, we are talking, but not able to achieve much progress. Then there comes our capacity to reimagine and re-engineering our experiences and build a new system. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
లింబాద్రి గారు
అన్న మీరు conclude చేయండి.
Okay,
మీరు
thank
చేయండి.
you very much for all the people. I think.
లక్ష్మణ మీరు చేయండి.
Thank you, sir. I think your lecture not only eye-opening, not only new thinking, but it's a practical approach to have a developed new system. It should be your idea is it should be balanced. Definitely, anything it should not go extreme. Any extreme is always it's a problem to develop the society. I think your understanding and your opinion on the issue, it's a very useful to rethink and reorganize ourselves. I think rightly you said the Center for Dalit Studies, the meant for these discussions. We believe in dialogue, we believe in discussion, we believe in debate, not
Exactly.
in any eccentric, not in any single ideas. That's why we are inviting people, whoever maybe whatever their ideas to deliver in their lecture. We are welcome to them. Then we have to listen to them. Then we have to learn from them. It's a very useful thinking. I think from this lecture, we are going to have two things, sir. We are going to publish all the lectures in each lecture is one book. I am thinking. Second thing is it should be put in the YouTube and in digital form. And third thing, we are going to have a one gathering. All scholars who gave the lectures in 75 series, we will invite to Hyderabad, and we have a 2 days or 3 days or 1 day, not at all decided, but one gathering of the scholars galaxy meeting, like that 75 people who gave the lecture, we can invite them and we can honor them on January 26, 2026. Sir, I am in advance. I am requesting to please keep your
You
date
have
to Hyderabad.
plans.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I thank you. Thanks to Professor Limbadri garu and other people, Ramchandra Murthy garu, Sukhdev garu, Vinod garu. I think whoever attended in the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rashmi garu. Thanks to all
Thanks,
the
Anna. Thanks.
participants also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Very distinguished participants. Thank you, Professor Limbadri. Professor
Thank you.
I thanks to Raghvacharya garu also. I am sorry.
Raghavacharya garu and
All Vijay Kumar garu is there. So many people are there. Please.